Utah lawmakers announced new plans to save the Great Salt Lake from drying up today.
And a new report says the state must act now to save the lake, which hit historically low water levels.
Scientists say losing it would be an economic and ecological disaster for Utah.
Well, Heidi and Mark, this report doesn't pull any punches. It says that the Great Salt Lake has dropped because of drought and climate change, but the biggest reason for the falling water levels is us.
Great Salt Lake is a terminal lake, and that means it's at the bottom of a watershed, and it's one of the largest watersheds in North America. As the water trickles down, it gets used upstream, and we only get in the bottom what's left over. Water leaves a terminal lake not by flowing out to the ocean, but only by evaporation. And right now we have more water going out than coming in. And that's the crisis that has created a shrinking Great Salt Lake. So a large proportion of the water that's being used upstream is being used for agriculture. And the municipalities really can't give up their water because they have to provide water for the cities and towns and for the people who live there. But agriculture is part of the equation that we could adjust.
The biggest consumer of water in the West, and really I would say across the planet, is to grow food, to irrigate agriculture. For example, in the case of the Great Salt Lake, there are tributary rivers that feed that lake. And as that water is put to use, there is less water entering the lake, and the balance of the lake will shift.
A lot of farmers in Utah grow alfalfa, which is a very water-hungry grass, but that's what the market dictates. So they're not doing it for a love of alfalfa, they're doing it because that makes more money for their farm.
And the types of, for example, agriculture that water is allocated to can make a big difference, whether it's to grow alfalfa to feed cows or whether it's to grow corn or other things. Each of those has a different footprint, and I think an argument can be made to reconsider those allocations from time to time as we as a society grow and change.
Could we have incentives that allow farmers to do one less cutting of grass or maybe to grow a different crop? And the state is working with farmers on trying to do just that.
When you have a stream of water that is feeding a lake and you have 1,000 straws into it, no big deal. When you get 1,000,000 straws in that stream of water, plus all the water that is taken out for farming and for growing alfalfa, and most of that gets shipped to China. So our lake is diminishing so that we can feed cows in China. It makes no sense.
This is the most important body of water on the Pacific Flyway, and those birds eat on the open water one of two invertebrates. They either eat the brine fly or the brine shrimp.
We want to know if there is higher salinity, if the brine fly population decreases. That's our main question, and it's our main question because we're worried that the lake levels are going to go down, and when the lake levels go down, the salt doesn't go anywhere, and that could in turn affect the brine flies, which affect all the bird species that we see out here.
This is like a bird paradise. It's like a giant buffet when the system is doing well. And so we had a big snow year that brought some more water to the lake, and we saw this lake go from crisis in 22 to being full of life again. And we're worried with cyclical drought because we still haven't reached the elevation of the happy place of the biology yet, but there's a point at which you push it too far. And we came awfully close in 22 to that cliff's edge. And I hope that that instilled enough sense of emergency that the state legislature and the people of Utah are willing to push this forward, this mission to save Great Salt Lake.
7 to 10 million individual birds visit this lake specifically every year. That's a lot of birds. And they're coming from all over the Western Hemisphere. So if you think about birds coming from, like the northern part of this hemisphere and the southern part, kind of spanning the earth, coming here, this lake is this vital, unique resource. And if the water levels go down, if the salinity goes up, if it dries up and there is no food for these birds, we're not just impacting the environment here. We're not just impacting the people who live here, who are going to have to deal with the consequences of a dried up lake and an exposed lake bed that blows into the city, but we're impacting these birds that visit the entire Western Hemisphere, and that will have major consequences, huge ripple effects just throughout, and how that affects other places.
The brine shrimp are super interesting because they all die in the winter, and they leave behind embryos that have been encysted, so we call them cysts. And the cysts float on the surface of the lake and wait for the water to warm up. And so when the spring runoff happens, those guys hatch into baby brine shrimp and then grow into the adults. And so the brine shrimp have a life cycle that's very different than the brine fly. And the cysts are actually part of a multi-million-dollar industry. There is a managed harvest of these cysts every year on the lake. I say managed because the biologists that work for the state make sure that the companies only take a certain amount, and what allows the population to renew. What the industry here says is that 60% of the seafood that humans eat has been fed brine shrimp from Great Salt Lake all around the world. So this is a really important industry internationally, and certainly it's big money and a lot of jobs, more than 2,000 jobs, I think, for the state of Utah. What we know is that when the lake water gets too salty, the brine flies die, the brine shrimp die, we don't see birds there. The algal mats on the bottom of the lake die. So we know what's going to happen. If we hit a point of no return, in terms of salinity, we've done this experiment before, because in 1960, folks built a railroad causeway just north of me here across the lake, and they segmented the north part of the lake from the south part. And the north part doesn't get the mountain snow runoff. And so it just gets saltier and saltier and saltier. The other thing that we're worried about as the lake shrinks is that it exposes more of this playa. And this playa doesn't grow a lot of plants because of the salt content. And so the result is it becomes airborne dust. And so we're already having dust storms in Salt Lake, a portion of which can be attributed to the dust around Great Salt Lake. And that really could make living along the Wasatch Front really a tenuous situation. The air quality could get worse and worse. And the people who live in the western U.S., every single person understands air quality because they've lived through fire smoke or mountain inversions. And I think that people are really concerned about that, and that concern is driving a lot of change. So it's important to get the right messages to the right people so that they understand this crisis is not just about the birds. And I sure love the birds, but everyone's not going to care about the birds. So find other messages for people, because I think there's a million reasons to care about what's happening at Great Salt Lake.
And I know there are lots of people working on it, and even the legislature's finally taking it seriously, or they're studying it. What steps they'll take, I don't know, because we really do have a legislature right now that is growth at all costs. But the problem with that is there is a cost for that kind of growth. And the birds will pay it, the bison will pay it, the wildlife in the mountains will pay it, and we will pay it. We'll pay it with increased cancers, more asthma, more days when we can't leave our houses because of the pollution. And so when this lake diminishes, it diminishes us. And when our species are threatened, it really threatens us. And we like to think there's some invisible barrier that's going to protect us from our own actions. And it's not. There isn't an invisible barrier. And if this lake disappears, all of the heavy metals that are at the bottom of this lake are going to blow right into Salt Lake.
In not just Salt Lake City, but all along northern Utah's mountain Wasatch Front, I mean, the predictions are dire for the diseases, the lung cancer, the asthma, the pulmonary crisis that would happen, and it would affect millions of people. And I think it has been shown to really cut lifespans short in large numbers. And again, we've done this experiment as well. We've done this experiment at Owens Lake, where people in the 1920s and 30s intentionally drained water from Owens Valley to feed water to LA. And what happened was the dust that came from that basin caused the worst air pollution crisis ever measured in North America. Even if your reason is economics, that's still a reason, right? Even if your reason is the lake effect that produces this incredible snow we have in Utah. When storms roll over this lake, they pick up all this moisture and they dump it in snow in our mountains. And we have people from all over the world that come here for that snow. Do you care about those tourist dollars? Like, there's a reason to care for everybody, you know?
We can keep doing more studies and more studies about the ecological footprint of the state of Utah and what's happening in this state with all of the in-migration now that's really increasing our population. And it's not changing it. The Great Salt Lake continues to recede.
One of my favorite illustrations, and it goes back to the footprint, the ecological footprint, which is a function of carrying capacity, which is the ability for a region or a planet or a community to support the human population as well as the natural species based on the availability of resources and how much the planet or the region can absorb pollution and regenerate resources in a balanced manner. Utah would require 7 planet Earths, last count, because of our mindset in this state of luxury consumption and the need for comfort and convenience at all costs, more so than other parts of the nation.
I once had a friend who said, "Oh, I can't believe my friend drives a Hummer. Do you know how bad that is for the environment?" I said, "Yes, but she chose not to have children." So I think it's okay that she drives a Hummer because those children won't have children and won't have children. We make choices every day. Do we buy a used shirt or a used car from, something from the thrift store, or do we go buy brand new, knowing that what we toss is going to end up in a landfill? And we're not talking about population control. We are talking about having a stable population so that the migratory birds have a place to land, so that the buffalo have water that graze on this beautiful antelope island, so that the wildlife in the mountains, we're not building more and more and more houses up into their habitat. we're not thinking about all of the creatures in this beautiful state. We often just think about ourselves.
I think the solutions have a lot to do with the way we use water. Farmers, for example, use a lot of the water before it makes its way down the watershed, and they don't even have the ability to measure the amount of water they're using. And so putting some of these solutions in the hands of agriculture, I think, is a really important step to a solution. One thing that hasn't really been tried in Utah is raising the price of water. And in every city in the West where they've raised the price of water, there's psychology involved, like people use less water. And I'm really grateful to say that the state legislature, the governor's office, this new position of Great Salt Lake Commissioner, they're all taking this very seriously, and they're trying to implement some of these solutions. I'm just worried that there's not enough time, for those type of policy solutions to trickle down. And that's why we need activism on the ground to try to make this happen. And we need scientists like us who are out here demonstrating the problem and giving data to the problem and the solutions.
See the salty sea, sunset of gray-green water sheen, salmon clouds abound all around, no sound, profound, dirty, dusty, thirsty drought. We wail to no avail, frail, no rail, not for sale, another trail, sold, antelope lope, fallon rope cope, a slippery, salty slope. Hope? Let the brine shine sublime.